Let's talk about the truth behind the Dempsey roll. Why is a move that is portrayed to be so overpowered in the Hajime no Ippo series not seen in every single real-life boxing match? For starters, what is the Dempsey roll? Because I'm constantly seeing misconceptions surrounding this move. The main argument that I see is people arguing whether or not the Dempsey roll we see in Hajime no Ippo is the Dempsey roll invented by Jack Dempsey or the D'Amato shift made by Mike Tyson's trainer Cus D'Amato. Now, obviously, it is called the Dempsey roll in Hajime no Ippo, but I don't want you to disregard either argument here because there is valid points for both. We'll talk more later in this video about why we are not constantly seeing this technique used in real life fighting, but before we do that, we have to identify what Ippo is actually doing because it's some sort of weird hybrid between a Cus D'Amato shift and a Jack Dempsey roll. Here is the best visualization we have of the Jack Dempsey roll. Now let's take a look at this footage and try to compare it to the Dempsey roll we see in Hajime no Ippo. While he might not be in the peekaboo stance like Ippo is, the most convincing similarity we are going to see here is how Jack Dempsey uses his feet to pivot his momentum and utilize it fully in order to put more power into his punches. Something we saw Ippo struggle with in the show is having to bear the burden of constantly pivoting like that. Bearing all of that momentum on his joints. But something we see Ippo do that just isn't realistic, especially in the Jack Dempsey roll, is we see Ippo in the peekaboo stance building up momentum and then utilizing that momentum. That's just not how the human body works. You can't just store momentum like that and unleash it, which is why we see Jack Dempsey just fully committing to every swing, fully putting all of his body weight into his hooks as he goes back and forth. Now, Ippo bearing that burden on his joints is definitely realistic, but him being able to block and build up momentum before he does the motion is just not possible. Except it kind of is possible because the movement that we see Ippo doing in the anime is not just the Jack Dempsey roll, it is kind of a combination of the Cus D'Amato shift and the Jack Dempsey roll. One look at the Cus D'Amato shift in action and you will immediately see the similarities between Mike Tyson and Ippo.
I want to be a professional boxer. I want to compete in real matches just like you, Mr. Takamo.
The movement that Ippo does at the beginning of the Dempsey roll is exactly what Mike Tyson does. The figure 8 motion trying to slip punches. The only difference is what Ippo is looking to do. Ippo with his Dempsey roll is trying to build up momentum to unleash it. Mike Tyson is willing to kill his momentum if it means finding an opportunity to attack himself. So the Jack Dempsey roll is mostly an offensive ability that is willing to risk everything for big damage, while the Cus D'Amato shift is a slower paced defensive and offensive hybrid technique. So now that we have identified the difference between these two techniques, what is it that Ippo is actually doing? If you said Ippo was doing the Cus D'Amato shift, while it might not sound like that's what he's doing because the show literally calls it the Dempsey roll, you would be correct. The show portrays Ippo as trying to build momentum when in reality, if this was a real ability, he would be doing the Cus D'Amato shift in order to find an opportunity to attack, and then once he finds that opportunity, he would be using the Jack Dempsey roll to capitalize on that opportunity that he found. So what we see Ippo do is literally a hybrid between these two techniques. But stop, because we now have a curveball, as there is a third boxer that is specifically shouted out in Hajime no Ippo for using the Dempsey roll. In chapter 420, Coach Kamigawa shouts out a fighter named Takashi Fuji for using the Dempsey roll. He says the Dempsey roll is a massively powerful technique. Men like Jack Dempsey and Fuji Takashi conquered the world with such power, but why do we not see it today? What reason has history given us? The Dempsey roll is an extremely specialized technique. In order to continuously throw full body punches, the fighter needs extremely powerful legs. Most fighters simply don't have the natural build to use it. That is one reason. Now we're going to talk more later in this video about why we don't see this today, and honestly, Coach Kamigawa isn't that far off in my opinion. But let's take a look at the fighter that he mentioned, Takashi Fuji. As you can see, he is evading punches in a very similar style to the Cus D'Amato shift, and then he is unleashing all of his power with a Jack Dempsey roll. I personally think Takashi Fuji is a better example of the Dempsey roll we see in Hajime no Ippo than Mike Tyson or Jack Dempsey. I actually think this is exactly what we see in Hajime no Ippo, if what we see in Hajime no Ippo was translated into real life, but unfortunately no one has the power to make jet engine noises as they bob and weave. Except for me, of course, but luckily for other boxers, I'm taking a break right now. But as for now, I do think this is the best example of the Dempsey roll we see in Hajime no Ippo. But now that we have a good example of what Ippo is doing, why do people not use it in real life? Because it seems like it would be broken, right? Now, I personally do not have a very extensive knowledge on Takashi Fuji, but if I had to guess, I would say he has a very similar skill set to Mike Tyson. Even if you don't watch boxing, you should probably know that Ippo is based off of Mike Tyson. Why is Mike Tyson one of the best boxers of all time? Even if you just know who Ippo is, the obvious answer is power. But unfortunately, you can't be one of the best boxers of all time just off of power alone, and Mike Tyson definitely has more than just power. Mike Tyson, whether you want to agree with me or not, is one of the most technical boxers we have ever seen. There is a lot of boxers that lack power but have amazing technique. A fictional example of this would be Miyata. This guy doesn't have a lot of power, but he makes up for it with ridiculous technique. Comparing Mike Tyson to real life boxers of similar skill sets to Miyata, some people might try to make the argument that Mike Tyson isn't mechanical, especially when comparing him to fighters who made it without strength. But the reason that Mike Tyson is probably a top 5 heavyweight of all time is because of his combination of technique and strength. Like I said earlier, I do kind of agree with Coach Kamigawa here. A lot of people do lack the strength in order to do the Dempsey roll that Ippo is doing. If you are doing Ippo's Dempsey roll, you have to have enough strength to make all of the stamina that you are using to do the technique worth it. And you also have to have enough technique to do the custom auto shift in order to find an opening that is nice enough to capitalize on with a Jack Dempsey roll. And you have to have the decision making in order to realize when a vulnerability has been spotted in your opponent and quickly capitalize with a technique that makes yourself extremely vulnerable. So you have to combine ridiculous strength, ridiculous technique, amazing decision making, and while you are vulnerable, doing the primarily offensive ability, you don't want to get knocked out immediately, so you have to be aware of where your opponent is, where they're looking, how they're feeling. There is so much that goes into successfully performing this technique. I went into researching for this video thinking that the Dempsey roll was completely fiction. I thought people don't do it because it's not good. I looked at old footage of Jack Dempsey just wailing around and I thought, yeah, that wouldn't work today. People just got better at boxing. When in reality, the only reason I believe we've only seen a few people pull this technique off in real life is because only a few people require all of the skills and talent to perform this technique. And one of those few people who did have the skills and talent to perform this technique is Mike Tyson, the character that Ippo is based off of. So in conclusion, is the Dempsey roll realistic? What is the truth behind the Dempsey roll? The truth is, it's honestly not bad. I think it would be viable in real life if you had the right person doing it. And I think the way it's portrayed in the show is obviously exaggerated, but not so much so that it is a completely fictional ability like the Kamehameha. But of course, a lot of this is speculation in my opinion, so I'm curious to know what you guys think. Leave a comment and let me know. And while you're down there, maybe leave a like and subscribe if you want me to make more Hajime no Ippo content. I had a lot of fun making this video, so I really appreciate you watching to the end, and I hope you have yourself a good one.